The conference room had never been so crowded after hours. 28 employees from different departments sat around the table and lined the walls, their faces illuminated by Maria's PowerPoint presentation. Thomas stood at the front, watching their expressions shift from confusion to shock to anger as the evidence unfolded. "This is James Morrison, CFO of Meridian Solutions in 2021. Maria clicked to the next slide. Successful executive, married 15 years, hired a new assistant named Jennifer Matthews. The room stirred as Jessica's familiar face appeared, sporting auburn hair. 6 months later, his wife Linda filed for divorce, citing emotional neglect. During the proceedings, evidence of financial mismanagement emerged. He lost his job, his reputation, and most of his assets. "I remember reading about that," David from accounts spoke up. "It was a huge scandal. The numbers were cooked so professionally that," he stopped, realization dawning. "That's why those projections looked wrong. She's using the same playbook." Rachel from HR stood up, clutching a folder. "I ran a deep background check on Jessica Morgan. Her references, education, everything. It's all fabricated. The companies exist, but the contact numbers all trace back to temporary phones. Even her social security number has irregularities." "But here's where it gets interesting," Maria continued, switching to a new slide. 3 months after Morrison's downfall, Linda divorced him and disappeared with half his assets. "Look familiar?" The next image showed Linda Morrison at a cafe. Sarah sat across from her, both women laughing. The room erupted in murmurs. Thomas watched his colleagues' faces as they processed the scope of the conspiracy. These weren't just office betrayals. They were witnessing the exposure of a sophisticated criminal operation. "They've done this before," Maria explained, pulling up more cases. Robert Chen at Pacific Trust in 2022, no relation to Thomas. Michael Santos at Innovative Tech in 2023. Each time, the same pattern. Jessica under a different name becomes the assistant, befriends the wife, or sometimes, like in Thomas's case, they're already working together. They spend months gathering dirt, manipulating documents, and setting up their target for a fall. "We've all seen the signs." Kevin from It added. "Jessica accessing files she shouldn't, staying late to work. Those convenient computer glitches during important presentations. I have logs of her unauthorized access attempts." One by one, employees started speaking up. The receptionist who'd noticed Sarah visiting multiple times before Jessica was hired. The intern who'd overheard suspicious phone calls. The security guard who'd seen them meeting in the parking garage late at night. "They thought nobody was watching," Maria said, her voice firm. "They thought we were all too busy, too disconnected to notice. But this isn't just about Thomas anymore. This is about stopping them before they destroy someone else's life." Thomas looked around the room, throat tight with emotion. Where Sarah and Jessica had expected to find allies in their scheme, they created a united front against them. His colleagues weren't just gathering evidence, they were forming an army. "So," Maria asked, turning to the group, "who's ready to help us take them down?" Every hand in the room went up. The office had emptied hours ago, but light still spilled from the accounting department, where Maria Martinez sat surrounded by stacks of financial reports, her computer screens casting a blue glow across her determined face. Thomas stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, still processing the events from the board meeting. "I've been tracking the discrepancies for months," Maria said, gesturing for him to sit. Her usually quiet demeanor had been replaced by focused intensity. At first, they were subtle, small variations in project costs, slightly altered timelines. "But look at this." She pulled up a spreadsheet, rows highlighted in urgent red. Jessica didn't just manipulate the Johnson presentation numbers. She's been systematically altering data since her first week. Thomas leaned forward, scanning the figures. "How did you catch this?" Maria smiled grimly. "Because she got sloppy, overconfident." She clicked through to another screen. "But that's not the real story. While documenting these discrepancies, I found something else, something that didn't make sense." She opened a folder labeled Employment Records, 2024, and pulled up Jessica's application. "Look at her reference from Meridian Solutions. Maria pointed to a phone number. I called it last week. The number belongs to a burner phone purchased 3 months ago. The company exists, but they've never heard of Jessica Morgan, so I dug deeper. Thomas watched as Maria pulled up social media screenshots, old company newsletters, and court records. This is Jessica, she said, pointing to a photo from 2022. Except here, she's Jennifer Matthews. And in 2021, she was Janet Miller. Each image showed the same woman with different hair colors, different names, but the same predatory smile. And Sarah? Thomas asked, his mouth dry. Maria's expression tightened. That's where it gets interesting. She opened a series of news articles. 3 executives in the past 5 years. All successful, all divorced, all professionally ruined. And look who appears in the background of this company photo from Capital Investments in 2021. Thomas stared at the image. There was Sarah, hair shorter but unmistakable, standing beside Jennifer/Jessica/Janet. They've known each other for years. They're professionals, Thomas. Con artists targeting successful executives. The assistant gets hired. The wife files for divorce. And the target's career implodes right when they need their professional reputation most. Maria pulled up bank records. They'd stolen millions through divorce settlements and embezzlement schemes. Thomas sank back in his chair, the weight of the revelation settling over him. Why me? Because you're kind, Maria said softly. You mentor people. Trust them. They counted on that. She straightened, determination flashing in her eyes. But they made a mistake this time. What's that? They forgot about the quiet ones. The watchers. The people you've helped over the years who actually care about the truth. Maria turned to her computer, opening a new folder labeled Evidence. Now let me show you everything I've gathered, because after what I saw in that board meeting today, I think it's time we stop watching and start acting. The federal courthouse buzzed with anticipation as Thomas sat in the witness stand, his testimony the culmination of a 3-month investigation. Sarah and Jessica sat at separate tables with their lawyers, their once united front shattered by mutual betrayal. The prosecution had offered them deals to testify against each other, and both had jumped at the chance for leniency. Mr. Chen, the prosecutor began, please tell the court when you first became aware of the defendant's broader criminal enterprise. Thomas glanced at Maria in the gallery, remembering those late nights piecing together the puzzle. What we uncovered wasn't just about my case. It was a sophisticated operation targeting executives across multiple states. Each victim followed the same pattern. Successful professional, seemingly perfect marriage, loyal assistant. They didn't just steal money, they destroyed lives. The evidence mounted like an avalanche. Banking records revealed millions in stolen assets, laundered through a maze of shell companies. Jessica's multiple identities emerged, each new job application crafted with meticulous detail, each reference phone number leading to burner phones and fake companies. Sarah's role proved even more calculating. She'd been the architect, selecting targets based on their psychological profiles, seeking men known for their trust and kindness. But their biggest mistake wasn't targeting Thomas. It was assuming their previous victims would stay silent out of shame. James Morrison took the stand, his testimony unwavering. I lost everything, my job, my reputation, my retirement. I nearly took my own life. His eyes locked onto Sarah. But watching them finally face justice, that's worth more than any amount they stole. The courthouse fell silent as the prosecution revealed their final bombshell. Special Agent Rebecca Torres stepped forward, her FBI badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. When Mr. Chen and his colleagues brought us their evidence, we discovered these crimes connected to an ongoing investigation. Every dollar they thought they were stealing had been tagged and tracked. Their entire operation was under surveillance from the moment they targeted Crawford and Mitchell. Sarah's composure finally cracked. She stood up, desperate to make a deal. I can give you names. Other operations, other teams like ours. Sit down, Mrs. Chen, the judge ordered sharply. But Thomas noticed Jessica's eyes narrow at this revelation. Her lawyer immediately requested a sidebar. Within hours, both women were competing to reveal the larger network of corporate con artists they'd worked with. Their testimony would eventually lead to dozens of arrests across 3 continents, exposing a criminal enterprise that had stolen over $100 million through similar schemes. As Thomas left the courthouse, a reporter thrust a microphone toward him. "How does it feel, knowing they'll serve significant prison time?" Thomas paused, considering. The spring sun felt warm on his face, and he could see Maria waiting by the steps, proud smile on her face. "Justice isn't about revenge," he replied finally. "It's about preventing them from hurting anyone else, and about showing other victims they're not alone." The judge's words still rang in his ears. "Sarah Chen and Jessica Morgan, this court sentences you each to 18 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 12 years. Additionally, you are ordered to pay restitution to all identified victims." The annual Christmas party at Crawford and Mitchell Advertising buzzed with the energy of success. String lights twinkled against floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm glow over the gathering of employees celebrating their most profitable quarter to date. Thomas Chen, 38, stood near the bar, loosening his designer tie as he watched his wife Sarah's musical laughter float across the room. She was standing with his new assistant, Jessica Morgan, both women holding champagne flutes and leaning close as if sharing secrets. Thomas smiled, pleased to see his wife of 7 years getting along so well with his staff. Sarah's dark hair caught the light as she touched Jessica's arm, lingering perhaps a moment too long. Something flickered in her eyes, a look Thomas had never seen before, but he dismissed it, attributing the observation to the 2 glasses of wine he'd already consumed. "Quite a party, isn't it?" David from accounts appeared beside him, nodding toward the scattered groups of cheerful employees. "Word is you're up for executive director after this quarter's numbers." Thomas nodded, allowing himself a moment of pride. The team really pulled together on the Samsung campaign. Jessica's been invaluable, handling all the coordination, staying late to perfect the presentations. He glanced at his assistant again, noting how her cream-colored dress complemented Sarah's deep burgundy. The following week, subtle changes began accumulating like snowflakes before a storm. Sarah's regular Tuesday tennis lessons became Thursday yoga classes. Her familiar vanilla perfume carried an unfamiliar undertone of jasmine. She started leaving earlier for her dental practice, citing morning consultations. Yet Thomas noticed her car still in the driveway when he left for work. Jessica's behavior shifted too. She started arriving at the office with 2 coffee cups instead of her usual one, disappearing for 15-minute breaks that coincided with Sarah's morning gap between patients. The coffee shop was just around the corner from Sarah's practice, a logical explanation that Thomas clung to, even as doubt crept in like a shadow at sunset. "Your wife has excellent taste," Jessica commented one morning, organizing files on his desk. Thomas looked up confused, until she gestured to the delicate silver bracelet on her wrist. His stomach dropped. The intricate pattern of intertwined hearts was unmistakable. He had spent weeks having it custom-made for Sarah's anniversary last year. "That's interesting," he managed, his mouth dry. "Where did you get it?" Jessica's smile held something he couldn't quite read. "Oh, just a gift from someone special." She turned back to the files, humming softly, while Thomas stared at the bracelet glinting under the office lights. In his mind, he heard Sarah's voice from months ago. "I must have misplaced it during a cleaning at the office. You know how careful I usually am with jewelry." The pieces were there, waiting to be assembled into a picture he wasn't ready to see. Like a magic eye puzzle, once the pattern emerged, it would be impossible to unsee. Thomas turned back to his computer screen, the quarterly reports blurring before his eyes as the first cracks appeared in his perfect life. The Johnson account presentation loomed like a storm cloud on Thomas's calendar. It was the kind of career-defining moment that typically energized him, but today his attention kept drifting to Jessica's iPhone, forgotten on his desk during her rushed exit to a client lunch. The screen lit up with an incoming message, and Thomas's world tilted on its axis. "He's clueless, babe. After the promotion falls through, he'll be too devastated to notice the divorce papers. You're brilliant at playing the devoted assistant." The sender's name made his hands tremble. "Sarah." Thomas stared at the preview, his throat constricting. The rational part of his brain screamed to leave the phone untouched, to maintain professional boundaries. But his trembling finger found the message preview, and the phone unlocked. Jessica had disabled the passcode days ago, he realized now, in what must have been a calculated move. The message thread between his wife and assistant stretched back months. Hundreds of messages. Thousands. As he scrolled, the depth of their betrayal unfolded like a poisonous flower. Photos of them together in hotel rooms, in his own home, in the bed he shared with Sarah. Screenshots of his confidential work emails that Jessica had forwarded. Detailed discussions of how to manipulate project data to make him appear incompetent. "I can't believe how easy it is," Jessica had written 3 months ago. "He trusts me completely. Already got him to revise the Q3 projections based on my research." Sarah's response twisted the knife. "That's my Thomas, always seeing the best in people. Remember when I said his biggest weakness would be his kind heart? Just keep playing the eager-to-learn assistant. He'll mentor you right into his downfall." But it was an earlier message that made his coffee and bile mixture rise in his throat. Dated 2 weeks before Jessica's job interview. Got the interview at his firm. "The HR manager bought my entire fake resume. You were right about them not checking references too deeply. Once I'm in as his assistant, we can start the real work. Can't wait to celebrate our plan coming together, babe." Thomas's hands were numb as he took screenshots of everything, sending them to his personal email. The messages revealed a calculated scheme that predated Jessica's employment, a precise plan to dismantle his career while Sarah prepared for divorce, ensuring he would be too professionally devastated to fight back. A soft knock at his office door made him jump. Maria from accounting stood there, concern etched on her face. "Thomas," the numbers Jessica provided for the Johnson presentation. Something's not adding up. He looked at his longtime colleague, seeing the worry in her eyes. For the first time since discovering the messages, Thomas felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps he wasn't as alone in this as Sarah and Jessica thought. The merger documents sat conspicuously on Thomas's desk, the Meridian Solutions logo clearly visible. He watched through half-closed eyes as Jessica lingered after their morning meeting, her gaze drawn to the papers like a moth to flame. The trap was set. "I have a lunch meeting," Thomas announced, deliberately leaving his laptop open with the merger presentation displayed. "Could you clean up these files while I'm gone?" Of course, Jessica smiled, that same practiced expression of eager helpfulness. "Take your time." From the hidden camera installed by IT, Thomas and Maria watched Jessica immediately photograph the documents with her phone the moment he left. Kevin from IT tracked the files being uploaded to a cloud drive she shared with Sarah. "Hook, line, and sinker," Maria whispered, watching the activity logs. She's already messaging Sarah about it. The company-wide meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. Sarah had insisted on attending, claiming she needed to address rumors about their marriage. The reality was, they knew she and Jessica planned to use the merger information as leverage, threatening to expose insider trading unless Thomas resigned quietly. What they didn't know was that the merger documents were elaborate fakes, created with the help of the actual Meridian Solutions CEO, one of their previous victims who was more than happy to assist in their downfall. As employees filed into the auditorium, Thomas noticed several hiding phones and small cameras. Everyone was in position, ready to document what was about to unfold. Jessica sat in the front row, radiating false concern. Sarah arrived last, wearing the same gray suit from the board meeting, ready to play her part as the wronged wife. "Before we begin," Sarah stood up without being invited, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "I think we need to address the elephant in the room. My husband." "Actually," Thomas interrupted smoothly, "I have a presentation I'd like to share first." He nodded to Kevin, who started the video. The screen filled with Jessica's face, not one, but many versions. Jennifer Matthews, Janet Miller, each identity documented with testimony from her previous victims. The footage cut to Sarah, caught on camera meeting with these same victims' ex-wives, planning their takedowns. "What's interesting," Thomas continued as Sarah's face drained of color, "is how you always target companies planning major deals. Like the Meridian Solutions merger you photographed this morning, Jessica. The one you already tried to use as blackmail. The CEO of Meridian Solutions himself walked in, very much alive and unruined. Except this time, the merger is real, and you've just committed corporate espionage on camera. FBI agents emerged from among the employees. Maria stood, holding up her tablet displaying banking records. We've documented every cent, every email, every meeting, the whole operation. You see, Thomas addressed the stunned Sarah and Jessica. You were so focused on the big play, you missed the small details, like how many lives you've touched, how many people you've hurt, how many witnesses you've created. The agents moved forward as Jessica lunged for her phone. Sarah darted for the exit, but found David and 2 security guards blocking her path. The thing about targeting good people, Thomas concluded, watching his wife and assistant being led away in handcuffs, is that they tend to have good friends, and we protect our own. The Crawford and Mitchell boardroom gleamed with morning sunlight, its mahogany table reflecting the faces of 12 board members who held Thomas's career in their manicured hands. His presentation on the Asian market expansion strategy was going smoothly until Jessica slipped into the room 10 minutes late, carrying a stack of folders with an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "But there are some urgent updates to the projections that the board needs to see." She distributed the folders with efficient grace, her silver bracelet, Sarah's bracelet, catching the light with each movement. Thomas continued speaking, but he noticed the shift immediately. Board members began frowning at the papers, then at him. Richard Matthews, the CEO, removed his glasses and rubbed his temples. The numbers in front of them told a completely different story than the one Thomas was presenting. "Mr. Chen," Matthews interrupted, "can you explain why these current figures show a 40% variance from your projections?" Before Thomas could respond, the boardroom door opened again. Sarah walked in, wearing a charcoal gray suit that she reserved for her most serious patient consultations. Her presence here, at his workplace, during a board meeting, was so unexpected that Thomas momentarily lost his ability to speak. "I apologize for the interruption," Sarah announced, her voice steady but trembling with what anyone who didn't know her would interpret as emotion. "But there's an urgent family matter that can't wait." She turned to Thomas, her eyes shining with artificial tears. "I can't do this anymore. The late nights, the obsession with work, the emotional distance. I've filed for divorce." The boardroom fell silent. Thomas watched the carefully orchestrated scene unfold, understanding now why Jessica had insisted this particular morning for the presentation. He saw the trap close in around him, the manipulated numbers suggesting incompetence, the wife claiming emotional neglect, the perfect narrative of a man falling apart professionally and personally. Jessica stepped forward, placing a comforting hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Mr. Matthews, I feel I should mention, I've been covering for Mr. Chen's mistakes for months. The real numbers." She gestured to the folders. "I couldn't stay silent anymore." Thomas stood there, tie suddenly too tight, aware of every eye in the room studying him for signs of the breakdown they expected. But a movement at the boardroom's glass wall caught his attention. Maria Martinez stood outside, holding up her tablet with a message clearly visible: "I have PROF." In that moment, Thomas felt an odd sense of calm. Sarah and Jessica had orchestrated their performance perfectly, but they'd forgotten one crucial detail. In their focus on destroying him, they'd overlooked the quiet observers who'd been watching them all along. "Actually," Thomas said, his voice remarkably steady, "I believe there's something the board needs to see." He met Jessica's eyes and saw the first flicker of uncertainty cross her face. "Maria, would you join us, please?" 1 year later, Thomas adjusted his tie as he faced the packed auditorium at the National Corporate Security Summit. 300 executives and security professionals waited to hear his keynote speech, "Trust but Verify. Protecting your company from inside jobs. The most dangerous predators," he began, "don't wear masks or carry weapons. They wear designer suits and carry credentials. They weaponize trust, turning kindness into vulnerability." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the audience. "I know, because I experienced it firsthand. The presentation screens behind him displayed the sophisticated framework he developed with Maria and their team, a comprehensive system for identifying and preventing corporate infiltration. Crawford and Mitchell had promoted him to Chief Strategy Officer 6 months ago, implementing his security protocols across all branches. The company's stock had surged as clients flocked to work with the firm that had exposed one of the largest corporate fraud rings in recent history. During the Q&A session, a young executive raised her hand. "How do you trust again after something like that?" Thomas smiled, his answer coming easily now. "Trust isn't the opposite of verification. The greatest lesson I learned wasn't to stop trusting. It was to build systems that protect good people while exposing those who abuse trust. Our new protocols have actually increased collaboration because people feel safer." After the applause died down and the audience began filing out, Thomas noticed Maria waiting in the lobby, a proud smile on her face. She'd traded her accounting desk for the position of head of internal controls, her attention to detail making her perfect for overseeing the company's new security measures. "Ready for dinner?" she asked, reaching for his hand. The simple gold band on her finger caught the light. They'd gotten married in a small ceremony 2 months ago, surrounded by their colleagues who'd become family through adversity. "Actually," Thomas said, "there's somewhere I want to stop first." They drove to a small diner across town. Through the window, Thomas could see Sarah and Jessica sitting at separate tables, dressed in prison uniforms, speaking with their lawyers. The appeals process had failed. Their sentences were upheld. More importantly, their testimony had led to the arrest of 32 other members of their criminal network. "Do you want to go in?" Maria asked softly. Thomas watched his ex-wife for a moment, remembering the life he thought they had. She looked older, harder. Jessica stared at documents, her former confidence replaced by desperate bargaining with her attorney. "No," he said finally, starting the car. "I just needed to see them one last time, to remind myself how far I've come." As they drove away, Thomas felt the last weight lift from his shoulders. His phone buzzed with a message from James Morrison. They were planning a support group for other executives who'd been targeted, turning their shared trauma into a force for positive change. "You know what's funny?" he said to Maria as they pulled up to their favorite restaurant. "They thought they were destroying me, but they actually helped me build something stronger. A better company, a stronger network of friends, and a life with someone who really loves me." Maria squeezed his hand. "Sometimes the best revenge is living well." "No," Thomas corrected with a smile. "Sometimes the best revenge is helping others live well too." They walked into the restaurant hand in hand, leaving the shadows of the past behind, stepping into a future built on real trust, genuine love, and the unshakable strength that comes from overcoming betrayal.